So I've I've actually known Sarah since I moved to Newmarket about 6 years ago. And her biography that was shared in our newsletter and on our Facebook social media page can't even come close to describing all of who she is. She homeschools her three boys. She actually studied herbalism, honed her survival skills. She volunteers, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's with a local palliative care facility. She does so much in the community and so much for free, really. She's just a big giving heart. Her connection to understanding and healing the whole person through things like Reiki and massage and sound therapy and meditation and hypnosis, all kind of culminate together to create this really caring, community-minded person. So today she's going to share with us a blend of her Métis culture and her herbalist designation to teach us how to live more in rhythm and harmony with nature to improve our lives. So Sarah, please take it away. We're all excited to hear you.
Helen, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. And I was hemming and hawing whether to start with a flute recording, but I think that's what we're going to touch on with after we do a land acknowledgement. So I'm just going to read our land acknowledgement. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to read our land acknowledgement from the York Region site because I didn't print it off, but we would like to start by acknowledging that we are on traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, big word, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence here continues to this day. We would also like to acknowledge that this is the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. We would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest Indigenous community and our partners in education. We acknowledge this land and the people because it's the first step to reconciliation in recognizing the existence of the Indigenous people. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action that we speak to the significance of these lands and our awareness of each other. I'm also going to add in my own words of gratitude that I always like to offer, whether it's with sound circles or with workshops, just that we have this opportunity to collect as like-minded individuals, to be able to speak different opinions, to be able to speak different things that we care about, and to know that we have the freedom right here in our community to do so. So I'd like to give gratitude for that as well. Why I want to talk and give just 2 minutes maybe to my flute, and I'll give you some imagery to go with it, is because when we talk about plants, when we consume plants, when we're with the plant, we're with a being, but a being who has not just taken up water and nutrients from the soil and not just taken in the power of the sun, but we're also with plants who have taken in the stories of other areas. So the wind is created from the relationship between the soil and the sun. As the heat rises from the land, then we start creating wind patterns. And we believe that these wind patterns carry the story of the land itself, as well as the people of that area. So on a really windy day, you can begin to connect with the stories from way far away, and the plants are taking in these stories as well. They're also taking in pheromones, and I could have such a long, juicy conversation about pheromones and plants and how they affect us, and that's why they're going to seed so rapidly right now, but that's a story for another day. But so when I play a wind instrument, and this is a double, it's a drone flute, I'm touching the wind. I'm connecting with the wind. I'm connecting with the voice of those and the stories of those other places and bringing them into my body and bringing them out again through music, through my own lens. So I wanted to offer that just at the beginning. I was going to offer it at the end, but usually it's a pretty good way to connect us. But the imagery that I want to give you is I want you to think of a plant from your childhood, because I am going to ask you about this later. Whether it was strawberry picking, an apple tree that you used to climb, maybe when you would go to sleep at night, you'd look outside and just see the branches swaying. And this plant or this garden, this strawberry patch almost kept you company. And I want you to connect in with that time when you were younger, how the light shone, how the dirt felt in your fingers or just sitting up that high, and giving gratitude to that space in yourself and that relationship that you connected. So, and I am going to be mindful of the time, but I'm going to play for a minute or two. And I think gratitude is always a good place to start. If you are wearing a headset, you'll want to turn it down. If you're not, you might want to turn your device up. Take a moment, bringing yourself back. And if anybody wants to type in the chat or thank you or unmute yourself and just share that plant experience you had, whether it was a raspberry bush or strawberries. And I think that's just a great way to start connecting us, because plants and how they teach us is through relationship. And then anything I say after this will make sense. And you'll have a way of anchoring it both spiritually and mentally. So let's have just a little share. I'd love to hear about your plant friends. Maybe we'll start with Brian.
I
Yes, Brian?
yeah, I'm just kind of getting present to what you're asking. I think what I've been noticing a lot of lately is, since like it's like a sort of late spring and summer's on its way, and I love the aroma that's sort of coming from the garden, our garden in the front yard, our trees, and just kind of releasing. And it's like I'm being welcomed back, kind of, because I'm very active and creative in the hot months. So kind of like I'm being, yeah, welcome back to like creation mode. That's kind of what kind of comes to mind for me.
That's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. And when we look at aromas, I've done aromatherapy for about 6 years, but it's usually based on plant teachings, with essential oils as the platform for those teachings. And aroma goes back to the limbic system. I mean, that's as old as it gets. So just having this ancient relationship with the plants, how it's touching on such a primal part of you, I think that's really powerful. So, Patty, what's your thoughts, Patty?
Well, you said to think back, and right away I thought, as a child, I used to climb trees a lot. And I wasn't that tall. I was quite young, and I would look for trees that I could get up, large trees, but they had low hanging branches, so I could get myself started. And I do remember that. And I would go up and I'd sit there for a long time. Now, I thought they were huge, but going back, who knows how tall they were. I was young. I did fall out one time and break my arm, but it didn't stop me from climbing trees I used to climb. More recently, I guess I've always loved being in the forest. We used to camp, even though I grew up in Toronto, my parents would take us camping for the whole summer. So we were with trees a lot, and I loved being in the forest. And that is my stress release. It has been, I've noted it as a stress releaser for myself for the last 10 years. So as things get tough, I say, I need to get into a forest to walk.
I was just thinking of you climbing the trees, and what I was thinking of was strength and agility. And especially right now, as you're changing seasons with your business and with where you're seeing yourself, there's going to be an identity change with that as well. And there's always some grief with that. Anytime we have a living loss, even if it's an exciting living loss, like a child moving out of home, our identity has changed. And it might be useful for you when you're having a moment over the next 3 to 4 months, as things change, really go back to climbing a tree and how strong you felt in your body. Because even though that tree was bigger than you had to find a bigness in yourself and an agility to climb a tree. Because I know I'm not a very tall person, and women have to climb with their whole body, not just their arms. So that was a whole body process. And these strengths, they don't just live as a memory in our mind, they live as a memory in our body. So that would be something that I would tune into, is that tree climbing for agility and strength of what that called in you and brought out in you. So that would be a teaching I would take from that.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I will.
Just,
Yeah.
and Jeannie, what are your thoughts? What did you have?
Well, I'm very fortunate to live in an area that has a lot of trees and a lot of plants, wild plants and all that. So I was, thinking, okay, so what does this feel like? And the strange thing, I don't know if it's strange, I kept picturing a rhubarb plant. And I don't have rhubarb plants here. I've never grown rhubarb. I've only ever had like strawberry rhubarb pie. But the rhubarb was very, very prominent in what I was visualizing. So I don't know what that means.
Would you like me to speak to that for you?
Sure.
Okay, so this is where it gets fun and juicy. So I will get to a conversation. I actually wrote up a whole page, but plants never work like that. They always have things to talk about. So rhubarb, some of the symbolism behind rhubarb is that the leaves are actually poisonous. I don't know if you know that,
Yeah.
Toxic. So, and the stems aren't. So some of the symbolism of that is knowing who or what you're working with and at what time. Because the neat thing about rhubarb and strawberry pie is that they actually grow at different times. So it's taking in a resource, which is the rhubarb, and putting it away for later when your strawberries are available.
Mm-hmm.
So that's foresight and planning.
Makes total sense. Yep.
Yeah. So is that helpful for you?
Definitely.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I just thought the first word you also talked about was wild plants. You can have wild strawberries, but I don't know if you can have wild rhubarb. That would be something for me to look into. But just the fact of bringing in something cultivated with something wild and bringing that in together, does that also help in something nourishing?
Yeah, and if you want me to continue sharing, I think I may have shared this last month with everyone. I'm in a huge transition, but my physical space is for my business. It will close down and will open up in a couple months. So I'm in a little bit of a, I'm just in transition right now and trying to find space. But yeah, so that makes complete sense to me anyways.
Cool. Bring that in with you, and you can always have some rhubarb pie or something just to help with that energy, but with that vitality and that message as well, like where you're kind of looking off into space and letting your body slow down and enjoying that. And then all the sensory with the aroma, that might be a nice way to celebrate your 10 years as well, that bit of wild with the domesticated. So
Nice.
Okay. Helen, what was your thoughts? Your plant story?
First of all, I want to just tell you how beautiful that music was. And it's kind of cool because it actually brought all this emotion up in me. Just so weird. So I was envisioning a willow tree that I used to spend so much time under as a kid. And I have no idea why this has affected me so much. But the kind of the message that I got from your flute playing is one of the things I loved about the willow tree was the breeze, moving through the fluid branches that those trees have. And I had this just a feeling of freedom, but also this feeling of protection, because I always felt protected under that tree. So Patty, you talked about climbing trees when you're little. I was a big tree climber as well. And that tree, when I was little, was already a good 30, 35 feet high. And I think everybody in my family climbed that tree as high as they could go, but we also had a swing under it. And I, played with my toys under there. It's just such a memory of my childhood.
That is so beautiful, Helen. And I want to cry with you. And if I do, just the tears happen, that's okay. Willow tree is about emotions. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, they do grow around water. Water represents fluidity. They represent emotions. They represent flexibility, and our relationships with willow, because they have a really dear relationship with water. If we walk into a forest, we're looking at a lot of things underneath the roots, how they interconnect with each other, mycelium, mushrooms, that kind of thing. But when we're working with willow, we're often working, I wouldn't say marshes per se, but definitely water spaces and the energy that that brings in. It's a really different habitat. So yeah, I just think that that emotion of willow, if you're feeling that emotions are stuck, that maybe you can't cry as easily, or if there's anger that's just not moving, willow can be really helpful for that. So
Very cool. Thank you.
yeah. And I want to, Cecily, am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are. Just like
Super.
Leslie. That's great. So as soon as you said that, I went back to when I was walking to school with friends. We had 2 long blocks. And as you finished the first long block, there was a detour you could take. And I don't even know how we discovered it one day. And there was it was almost like to the side of a park, 2 long lines of lilac trees. And those 2 long rows went all the way to the back end of the school playground. And so we could take that as an alternate route, get off the road and then zip over and all the way through. And the memory of the most gorgeous fragrance, the most gorgeous colors. But I also remember taking off shoes. And it was so protected because the lilac trees all met above. And it was like this magnificent wonderland. And you could just run through the whole thing. And you couldn't see out at all the whole way, and no one could see in. So you're barefoot, the feeling of the grass underneath your feet, the smell of the lilac bushes, the beautiful color. And I remember that sometimes we'd hear that first bell go, and it was like, oh no, because we'd stop to play for too long underneath there because it was just so beautiful, just being kids and chasing each other. And then it was like a mad dash, get your shoes on, don't want to get caught. And I find that just a few weeks ago, I opened my front door to step out, and our neighbors have lilac bushes. And the smell that just, my first feeling was that I was just floating back to a simpler time.
I think that is so beautiful. When you had mentioned taking off your shoes, I was already writing down prayer and vision. And that's exactly what you did with the lilacs was so the words, and I wrote them down, was that words that and these childhood memories are coming up right now at this time for a reason, right? Your body and these plants want to bring you something that you need right now. So with the lilac trees, you know, the word journey, the word detour, the words simpler time. And then if we look at holy and sacred, that's also what I was gathering, because from the color purple, from the crown chakra, we also have prayer and vision. Taking off your shoes, I think that's really healing as children and as adults, and it's also a really great way of showing respect to nature. We get everything from nature, right? Our clothing, our resources. And when we can take off our shoes, in so many cultures, that's a sign of respect and still is. So I would just encourage you at this time, especially when I was thinking about your work with grandkids as well as power of attorney. I wrote that down. That's really being in a place of working with other people's power and vulnerability, especially at key times. Taking off your shoes when you don't know the answer. That would be what I would be gathering from that. If you just need a moment. And it's the act in itself. It's not just having your shoes off. It's the act of consciously taking off your shoes and grounding. So hopefully that's helpful for you, or that ties into what you're working through right now.
Thank you.
So these are plant teachings. It's taking a lot of the symbolism of how the plants grow, the seasons that they grow, how they grow together, how they interact with us. When I talk about the plant people would have 2 capital P's. Plant people to acknowledge that they are beings, that they're beings that we work with and have a contribution to our lives. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about birch tree teachings, because we all can recognize, most of us can recognize a birch tree. birch trees are very white trees. And some people would say that they teach us about resourcefulness because the indigenous people were to use, able to use so many resources for canoes, for writing, for paper. But birch trees really teach us about our own vulnerability as well, and their vulnerability, as well as our stewardship and our ability to be stewards, because it's really easy to take advantage of birch trees. If you're sitting in a canoe, it's really easy to see the white trees. It's a white tree in a green forest. If you're standing on a hill, that's some of the first trees that you can recognize. So that reminds us of our ability to be good stewards of the land as well. Indigenous teachings. So I'm Métis through my father's side. He lives in northern Saskatchewan. I've been around trees and plants a long time. I do have plants talk to me. I hear them fairly often, fairly clearly for individuals, also through things that I've read as well. When we look at plant teachings and we look at teachings with a capital T and how that works in our lives, they're not just necessarily stories that Indigenous people have come up. So let's say you're reading a story about Indigenous people. Story, again, would be a capital S. And the reason why I'm bringing awareness to that is that if any of these teachings make you a better person or inspire you to be a better person, it's now considered real because it's had a real effect on a real life. Does that help? So I've been working with the library a little bit on how to relabel their Indigenous stories. And it was because they didn't understand, literally it was being lost in translation, that these weren't folklores. The earth on Turtle's back, if it's going to affect how they're going to behave, it's now considered real. It's a real living story. There's a couple of different things that I wanted to talk about. I did want to talk a little bit about the displacement of Indigenous people and why that would have such an effect, or I could talk about a few other things. I want to be mindful of our time, but it's actually really interesting. And with Indigenous people, because a lot of people think, well, if they were just moved to a different area when settlers first came into Canada, if they're so outdoorsy, shouldn't they be able to just acclimatize and develop new skill sets? But that's not necessarily what happened for a lot of different reasons, and it ties into the stories that you shared and into stories going forward. So when they were displaced, and I'm going to use a very general example as well as very obvious example, but let's take a look at the Indigenous people on the West Coast who were people of the salmon, people of the water, and you're going to now displace them inland. They actually don't know the migration routes of the animals inland, so they actually can't necessarily feed themselves. And they've also lost their identity because all their spiritual stories of the salmon people and how it's affected them, they don't have those stories anymore because they're no longer near those areas. So they've actually lost their whole identity and their meaning and their purpose. So I just think that's really helpful, especially going forward. I think the timing's really, really good to know with the graves being found, but also to that understanding that when we ourselves move areas, or one of our trees die in the yard, or one of our bushes gets sick with a disease, we've had a relationship with it. We've had the life stories, all of our family climbing a particular tree, or when we go to a campground every year with our family and we can anticipate seeing certain bushes and certain trees the way they are. If we think we're weird that we have a relationship, those are real. And the energy coming off a tree, it counters a lot of the electrical energy that we have in our walls, that we have in our phones, and that kind of thing. And it's not just the tree itself, it's also the roots underneath the ground. So it really is like walking into a 3D bubble. So if you're ever needing to detox energetically, a tree's a great place to go, or even a shrub, because their energy is quite massive. Plant teachings and anchors. I just think, do I have 5 more minutes? How are we looking?
You have longer than that.
Okay, good. Because I want to be mindful. So weight and motivation, these are some key words now, all going back to all of you. And I want to talk to that with the plants. I think that's important. Weight and motivation. Okay, I'm just going to say a few things because I also teach clinical hypnosis as well, and mind-body awareness. And what I thought was really interesting, and what you can bring to your motivation group, Brian, is that when we are in a state of stress, and all these plants are taking in that energy as well, when we're in a state of stress, our body actually only does 3 things. It conserves energy, it maintains reserves, and it's alert. That's it. So even if we're eating really, really well and we're burning calories, if our anxiety is quite peaked, we're going to hold on the weight because physiologically, that's what we're wired to do. So the more anchors we can have in our life, the more we can create a feeling of safety, which means that it is going to be easier to burn calories and to stay motivated. So I wanted to tie that in. So if you want to bring in a plant teaching, Brian, ask your individuals to pick a, now, plants is a little bit harder because if you choose a sunrise or a sunset like your anchor, that means your body is going to anticipate that it's going to happen. That need is going to be met when you watch it happen, the sunrise. And then after the sunrise, you're going to have the exhale as, oh, I've anticipated this need. This need has been met, and now I can feel safe. So, but if you do it with plants, now you have a relationship, and you risk that relationship with a tree, even it dying or the tree being blown over, losing branches. However, that's the juiciness of life. So have your clients pick an anchor to help with weight loss. I think that's really important. Patty, you were talking about new identity, your business shifting as well. Anchors again. So whether it's something, a plant in your yard, whether it's flowers, because the nice thing about flowers is you're actually going to be able to watch a cycle of life in the next 3 to 4 months. And you can pick some flowers, you can pick some characteristics. And in watching that cycle, especially if they reseed, is going to help with that celebration of the new growth and the new potential that's coming to you. All cooking oil, now I'm going off on a tangent, that's okay. All cooking oil, like sunflower oil, is the creation energy of the plant. So olive oil, any seed oil. So I would spend some time connecting with that as part of your new identity, and just being open and curious to however that's going to look. If you're working with other individuals this season going through changes, seeds and plants who have shorter life cycles, like in the next 4 months. That's what I would be.
Thank you.
Helen, with storytelling and education, that goes back to the wind. Just more listening to the wind, stories of other places, what's being blown in. There's nothing I love more than hanging up my clothes on a windy day and knowing that all the stories are being soaked into the shirt. Just a thought. So, that may not be a plant teaching, but it is, because trees and plants soak in that wind. Ancient teachings of all cultures. Jeannie, I think you know I'm talking about you. So let's go to pine tree teachings and how old and ancient they are. But everybody thinks evergreen are always evergreen. No. Evergreens know how to use the resources. They do go into dormancy. The neat thing about evergreens is that they define, we talk about a tree line. So that means they're defining the altitude on a mountain, how far up we're going. And they're also defining how north we're going on the planet. So these trees have to know their reserves. They have to know how to use them wisely. So hopefully that helps with you connecting in with the evergreens. And then Cecily, you were talking about your grandkids, and I already touched on power of attorney, identity, taking off your shoes as you need to. Also calendula, that's harder to find. If you live in Newmarket area, I'll give you some flowers. So calendula are small plants with a whole lot of power. They also gently reseed. So the seeds that I've been collecting have been the last 20 years from my mom and grandmother, mother-in-law in Austria. They can grow in North America, so they're not invasive at all, but they're gentle reseeders, and they're excellent for skin. So skin is, again, our identity. Our skin is protection. Our skin changes, right, as we age. Each season, whether we get a tan or not, how we're able to take in vitamin D. So that's our immunity as well. So calendula is excellent for that. So even if you're at Nature's Emporium, or if you live far away from the Newmarket area, but you can get into a health food store, calendula would be a great plant to connect with. So how is that, everybody? I had written totally other things, but that's okay. I think this has worked out well.
You can keep going. You have to. Yes, this is intriguing. I love it. I would say you have another 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, Helen, you're awesome. Because We were chatting this morning and I wanted to be respectful of time, but plant teachings really tie into what can I give each person, right? What are the plants trying to say? So I know, for example, and I can't mention which plant, unfortunately, because I don't want to give, I know this is being recorded and I don't want to give misinformation, but I know, for example, 6 years ago, I emotionally was hitting a bottom and I was quite ready to go into the psych ward of the hospital. And I went and I had a nap. And when I woke up, I heard a plant talk to me quite clearly. And I thought, well, you're interesting. And I contacted a naturopath because I needed to make sure that I was going to use it wisely and use it well. And I used it for 2 years. And I was wearing glasses up to that point, but I didn't need glasses for 5 years as I was using it. It was pretty important. A lot of things corrected itself. I stopped taking that herb. I need to wear glasses when I'm driving again and reading. That's fine. But just the point is it gave me vision. It's actually a solstice plant. It's a plant where it's named after a saint. It's funny because I opened up my phone the other day and the saint was supposed to be sent to a text for somebody. I've actually never looked them up on my phone. So between the plant and the saint, it was just a really powerful message that I was getting to connect into. When I work with essential oils, so this is just me talking broadly a little bit what I do. Sometimes when people come in for essential oils, they either want something physically for themselves or spiritually. Like they'll just say off the top, I need something for confidence, something for sadness. And a woman came in and she said, oh, I just trust you. And I said, well, I've been having Palmarosa speak to me, but I'll be honest, I actually don't work with the energetic properties that much. So I'm going to get one of my reference books for this one. And I flipped it open and sure enough, it wasn't something, it was a little delicate because it said betrayal. And I thought, whoa, so this could open a can of worms. So I had said to her, you know, it says betrayal. She says, perfect. So I'm like, great. So I blended it in. I gave her a massage. And so this is what I mean. I've come to trust the plant. So I had a guy friend come in and he had back pain. And there's so many different essential oils that you could use for back pain. I only generally pick 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 2. But if I need more than 3, I'm generally not blending well enough. Like being that in tune, you should only need 3 because I'm blending for the emotional properties with the clinical aspect of knowing the physical. But so I had a friend come in and one of the plants, cypress. Oh, that would be great too, Cecily, for if you like cypress essential oil, that'd be really good. It's about transition. It's about death. It's about power. It's about money. It's about finances. I got to meet it in person when I was in Croatia. So cypress is quite wonderful, but cypress, I was going to go into his massage oil for back pain. And I said, you know, it's really good for transition, if that means anything. He goes, yeah, actually, I'm writing an exam to transition to a new job. So that was really interesting as well. So any essential oils that you love to use, but maybe you have a headache and you don't feel like you can use it, even just holding the bottle because they have an energetic to them, that can be really helpful. Sometimes, and I now have switched over to essential oils, but that's okay. I always dilute them. There's so many different benefits for diluting them, but one wonderful reason for diluting them, again, is you're going to be putting them into a carrier oil, a vegetable oil, or into jojoba, and they're the creation energy of the plant. So why wouldn't I want to add creation energy to whatever product that I'm using, right? So that's something to consider as well. I'm just thinking right now, I had different things written down about how we all need anchors in our lives. Maybe we'll do that as the last activity then right now. Maybe what I'll do is I'll grab my other flute. The first flute I played for you was key of A, which is third eye. And a second flute I'm going to play for you is sacral chakra, key of D. And maybe that's what we'll do for closing. And what I want you to do is to think of a present day plant or tree you can connect with over this season. I mean, if you can do it for a year, great, but definitely, should we say fall equinox? I think that would be a good time and all through all the seasons. And just to see what it has to teach you. It could be a tree. It could be a short-lived annual, like some flowers. It could be a shrub, but something that you can see pretty regularly, a couple times a week at least. And I'm gonna just grab my other flute right behind me, and then I'll let you connect in with that. This flute was made specifically for me. It's bird's eye maple. They have a very good relationship with us. Made by an Indigenous man here in Ontario and gifted to me by my husband.
Mm.
Yeah, just very, very short, just to connect with that plant. I just want to thank you all for having me and taking the time to listen to the plants. And I will be keeping you in my heart as I play with the flute this summer. Part of it was calling to those who have walked before you and to those who have walked after you, that you can hear their prayers and their dreams for you as you walk in the next few months.
Thank you, Sarah. That was incredible. Are there any questions for Sarah?